So welcome to Built for MENA, the podcast exploring the real stories shaping advertising and marketing technology across the Middle East. This is a region moving fast, from retail media and programmatic out of home to AI, data regulation, and platforms scaling across vastly different markets. But too often, the real stories behind that growth do not get told. In each episode, I'm going to speak with the people building, selling, scaling, and sometimes breaking AdTech and MarTech in the Middle East. I'm going to do this to understand what actually works here, what doesn't, and why this region is so different. I'm Dom Kozak, and in every episode, I'm going to ask the guests the same questions so we can compare experiences, surface patterns, and get past those pesky press releases. So, to get started, tell us who you are, what you do today, and the path that led you into AdTech and MarTech in the Middle East.
Dom, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on this, sir. So Moda, or you can call me Sunil Modha as a full name, but everyone since my younger years has referenced me as Moda, and I decided
I've only ever known you as Moda.
Follow the route of Madonna, Dom, and I just rebranded myself and took on the one name, mate. Even Mrs. Moda to this day calls me Moda or Moda. So that's
Amazing.
what it is. Sunil was only referenced if I've done something completely wrong. So they're the watch outs. Your client partner for Smartly, been here in the region for just shy under 2 years now, but been very familiar with the Middle East on many occasions. Fronts. Personally, from a family perspective, culture perspective, it's close to home, Africa and India. Had the privilege to work here back in 2010 to 2016 for a global CPG, which I can't mention for one reason or another, but we all know who they are. And I look currently at Smartly. I look after the current book of business across the region, which spans across travel, retail, and some other unique verticals, which is always fun to work with.
But why don't you just let us know who are Smartly and what does Smartly do in the region?
Yeah, absolutely. So Smartly is a unified platform bringing your creative media intelligence under one roof. Powered by...
You want to say that one in English, Moda?
Sorry?
You want to say that one in English?
Think about it this way, making and building a better advertising experience for the consumers today, right? And that's all powered by creative, how you execute that across the different media platforms, how you bring on the wonderful world of intelligence to enhance that experience overall, across platform, cross channel, across different verticals, simplifying your creative and media across the ecosystem.
I mean, it's absolutely been a bugbear of mine as a posters guy, right? A true visual media that, sometimes creative is just an afterthought. So it really does need to be top of mind to actually drive effectiveness within a campaign. But enough about that. Let's get on to the standardized questions. So why don't you take us back to the moment that you realized that the Middle East was genuinely different for advertising or for ad tech? What happened?
2010. When I was flying over for a DSP, which was representing this global CPG brand, I was already engaged with multiple markets across the MENA region, but UAE was one that we decided to go and launch. And it was fantastic, the whole buzz in the business, the whole buzz when you're kind of bringing and taking on a new market, a new region. And it's always exciting. I almost see it's like a startup within a startup within a startup, because you're getting to learn new ways of working, culture nuances, new people, how the brand actually operates, even though they're global, how they operate from region to region. I guess it was day 2 in the meeting. And in the most simple way to put it is, and I said this to my fellow colleagues at dinner, which is our global playbook doesn't work in this region. And that said it all. That set the tone for the next couple of days. That set the tone of how we want to actually launch the market, how we want to engage with the client, how we want to engage with the agencies. How is our tech going to be relevant within this region as well, right? There were so many different realization checks there. The buying behavior, how they were utilizing data, ad safety, all the other programmatic 101 items you have to checklist, right? That's the day when I realized it's a very unique region. It's exciting. It operates completely different to the Western world, which we've been used to operating. Well, definitely I have. up until then. It genuinely made me realize it was almost unfinished business, Tom. Even though we operated the region out of EMEA, out of the European hubs, there was only so long you can continue operating in a manner where you fly in and out. You continue servicing the account, especially with their way, even just the way the region's set up in terms of agencies, the client direct, publishers. There's a lot of moving variables that you need to always be in person. And that was the day when I realized, one, I want to come and work here again. Two, AdTech needs to play a completely different role to the Western world. And I'm sure we're going to get into this later on. And it also gave me the perfect realization that the Middle East is completely different to the rest of the world in so many different ways.
Yeah, it's exactly why I wanted to start this podcast. I've been here, for only about 18 months now, and I'm still learning so much, operates differently, thinks differently, moves differently, some ways faster, some ways slower, but it's not the same. You can certainly say that.
So then I remember that, Dom. Our first handshake was genuinely getting to know each other. And what a day that was.
Yeah. Absolutely. It wasn't long after I landed. Evolving that a bit further and thinking about, okay, we talked about a little bit about the positives of the market, the dynamism, and that experience coming in that we've both done, right? We've both gone through that stage of coming from a different market and operating in this one. What's the biggest sort of AdTech or MarTech mistake that you see companies make when they're trying to enter into the region and trying to scale within the region?
There's a number of challenges a company will make coming here. And I think the one that stands out the most is understanding the cultural nuances, listening, understanding ways of operating here, how the actual the advertising ecosystem is as built here, right? And I think going back to my point I made earlier, the global playbook does not work. It stops working. And I think sometimes what happens, and you see it quite a lot in many global operations or businesses trying to enter the market, is still trying to use that one-size-fits-all sort of mentality. The people you hire on the ground, the way you commercially set yourself up, your commercial offering in the region, understanding the ecosystem itself, how the agencies, the brands, the tech partners will work together, how the publishers and the media channels work together. And then more importantly is the number of individuals you have on the ground here, their skill sets, their experiences, how are they set up for success in the region itself? And as you all know more than any, not just in corporate life, I mean, you see it of every day of your life here, being on the ground, which is, it's a relationship between you and the other human, right? That removes the transactional element of any form of relationship here. The first and foremost is, who am I engaging with? Who is this individual? What's their personality? What's their background? What makes them tick as an individual, not just in their careers, right? What's their family values? There's so many elements that go into building that first and foremost relationship and the touch points you have with any individual on the ground here before you go into business or the vision of where you both want to go, partnerships, all of this that you want, you both want to engage with. So that's really important. And, when you're building teams and you're building technologies or you're trying to launch it out here, these are the type of things you really do need to take into consideration. It's not just to move our business from UK to MENA and we'll fly a few people over and we'll hit the ground running. Unfortunately, that's not the way business operates here. And another thing is, it's like, depending on the type of solution you've got, is it very operational heavy? So the individuals you might be bringing into town here, are they very kind of technically minded? Can they think commercially? Can they think and go out there and be, building relationships? You need to be front of mind. You need to be in. I'm going to use the word networking very carefully here, right? But you need to be in a position of, Dom, if I'm going to shake your hand, you trust me. I'm not just another business selling you tech, saying all these buzzwords, trying to get a commercial agreement across the line and off we go to the next, right? They're not interested in that here. What they're interested in is longevity. change, building for the future, building for the better. And some of those assets and skill sets you can take from the Western world. But it's how do you apply that here?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that resonates with me since I've got here. I mean, there is, I think sometimes the perception, certainly from the outside in for the Middle East, that you just fly in talent and that's it, right? And you're off to the races. But if that talent isn't bringing value to the community that's already here, I think you're probably off to a really, really rough start. And that has to be critical to kind of how you position your business, at least in my opinion. But then thinking a bit more about those idiosyncrasies, if you like, is there a kind of a campaign or a product or a situation that's made you ever think this could only happen here in the Middle East?
There's many. It's a fantastic.
That you can talk about on this podcast that I won't have to edit out.
There's been so many of this. And that's what keeps me. That's why I love getting up every morning. There are so many different situations here. I want to go back to one because it goes back to our grassroots back in the UK, right? This was when I initially moved here, and I live in Dubai Hills, close to Dubai Hills Mall. Love it. One of my favorites. And initially, when you walk into malls, you think, in the UK, you get used to your bearings. You know exactly which your shop is. And here was in the initial stage, it was very fascinating and interesting of how it's built, especially to some of the malls I entered here back in 2010, 2005, and that was all Jumeirah stuff. But I don't know if you've been to Dubai Hills Mall. They've got the sports sector, and they've got Nike, Puma, they've got Adidas. And standing proud is Under Armour. And it's huge. Their brand presence here is phenomenal, incredible, especially to what, sometimes how a brand is utilized or perceived in other regions. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, that is incredible. The store was huge. The products, the way it was laid out, the brand ambassadors, Anthony Joshua standing proud on there as well. It's just fascinating to see how a global brand adapts and changes very quickly to the region they're operating in.
It's a super interesting thing you say. And it's something that I certainly noticed when I started to get out and on the ground is also you see brands here not only represent themselves differently, but also represent themselves at a different scale, at a different level, and with a really different perception. They've localized to the market. I'm guessing that's how those brands succeed in those types of environments.
100%. And it's really interesting to see their store layout, the type of in-store advertising they've got, the type of in-store branding they've got. They've really just adapted and changed the way they perceive themselves from market to market. And I think that's really important because when you look at brands and you look at especially global brands who are trying to penetrate new markets or operate in other markets as well, we talk about this thing every day of our lives, which is localization. What does it mean to a brand? And it's a hard question to answer, right? And this is going back to my statement again, the global playbook doesn't work. So you need to adapt that playbook. And you need to really sit down in the region you're trying to operate in, regardless of what you're trying to run here, and understand what do we need to consider if we want to enter and be present in this market. And I think Under Armour have done that fantastically.
And I think it's one of the big differences, I guess, when you think about what are the fundamentals underpinning those differences. I guess my perception here is that when you are operating in, say, Europe or North America, or even markets like Japan and China, perhaps there's a longer heritage or brand legacy. And that also comes with baggage. And here, in my experience, there's very rarely baggage. There's very much a much forward-thinking, more dynamic, newer mentality, particularly when it comes to brand value, and then how you present that into the populace. But moving on to more of a kind of personal level, your work with either brands or agencies or governments here, have they changed the way that you personally think about either advertising or technology in the space that we work and live in?
100%. It's a completely different way of working. It's a completely different way of thinking. And I'll say this because it's going back to the point I made earlier as well, which is it's so relationship based with the brand, with the agencies, and the way the government overall operates and governs the ecosystem, governs these organizations. And you'll also notice, the hierarchical structure is very different to the Western world. So you never know who you're going to walk into a meeting with, who's going to be sitting opposite you on a table. Going back to that point, knowing your audience, how you engage with them, how you adapt and tailor your narrative. Going back to that point of building that relationship, the trust. If you're a technology provider, a brand is coming to you for guidance, the value, and they're trying. They're leaning on you, saying, "Okay, if you are this best-in-class solution provider, how should we be adopting it? What should we be doing with the tool?" I think it's very apparent that these organizations and the individuals within them are fully aware that technology can deliver what they need it to deliver, but they're looking at the how. And what am I thinking? What have I not thought of is a better way of phrasing it. Going back to my days when I was at InfoSum, which was the clean room technology. And it got very interesting. Like when you go out with a technology, you go out with the value of a proposition and how it's, going to benefit organizations. Very quickly, these organizations, whether it's an agency, the government-based organizations or brands, are very quickly leaning on that more of a consultative approach, like be our friend, be our partner, guide us along the way.
You're absolutely speaking to my day-to-day experience. We can talk about great solutions and applications, but really, what does it mean for that brand, for that agency, for that partner? How do they implement it? How do you support them? How do you demonstrate it works? How do you gain actionable intelligence off the back of it? I mean, the other thing that you mentioned, or you alluded to maybe, that I thought was really interesting is something that I've been surprised by here, which is the amount of meetings I've been in with, I don't know, the CMO of a brand or the marketing manager of a brand. And you find yourself, particularly with local businesses, all of a sudden talking to the owner, to the family that owns the business, who wants to be in the room, who wants to have that personal connection, who wants to look in your eyes and trust you and hear what you have to say, and will equally hold you accountable. And I think for me, that's a huge, huge difference.
And I think I was going to say to that, Tom, and it's a fantastic point, right? And if that experience is surreal sometimes, right? Surreal in so many ways because it brings a level of respect. The region is very big on knowledge. It's not just a value, how much knowledge they want to listen. And equally, they're asking their partners that they want to engage with to also listen, hear them out, right? And I think that's so important. So going back to your point, I know I went off tangent, but wanted to get to the point of what's made me think differently and change the way I personally think about advertising technology here is listening, really understanding the core of those businesses and their needs.
Yeah, I think it's an often forgotten skill, particularly within the commercial world and the sales world, that you'll see people go in and talk and pitch their wares. But at the end of the day, if you can't genuinely support a business and help them grow, well, you need to understand the needs to actually get in there and do that and work with them. But that's kind of from inside the region. What about from the outside? Is there one particular AdTech or MarTech trend that's going on in MENA that people perhaps outside the region are completely misunderstanding, right?
I mean, there's loads. I think, put it in short, I think there's a perception from the outside world that MENA may not have caught or is not catching up with Europe or Western world. But actually, when you're on the ground here, it's completely different. I don't think they're playing catch up. It's a very deliberate way of moving. If you look at
I would say they're playing a different game. They're playing completely
100%. And it's intentional because what they're saying is we know, going back to this point, when you have these day-to-day conversations, especially being on a tech side, we know all these techs exist here. But when you take a couple of steps back, what they're trying to do is carve out the tech and understand what is actually longevity for this region. This technology, these solutions that are coming out, it doesn't have to be tech, it's services. When they're entering this region, how does it genuinely shape and shift the way this region needs to operate? How many different verticals or business needs can it solve? Right? I think we as an ecosystem, we can be transparent about this. How many tech providers are there? How many businesses have you walked into and you say, hey, so what's your tech stack like? And there's a list that just keeps on going. Some of them are duplications. I mean, good on those techs for being there and still lasting there. But if you look at it from a business operation point of view and, if you look at P&L, how the business is operating and running, there's just cost, they're overheads. Some of them probably don't even know why they exist. And that's what this region is doing. It's being very deliberate on, okay, this tech is here and it's going to solve X, Y, and Z for us. Cost then becomes irrelevant. It's the service that's coming with it. The humans that are servicing this technology and are genuinely experts, and they're going to help us shape the way the region wants to go. I mean, you see it in our talks. It's very interesting when we go to the IAB, the campaign, the industry-led discussions, and even some of the non-industry of how they're seeing some of these solutions.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very different angle and very misunderstood from perhaps from outside the region for sure. Let's go one step further. Let's go into some kind of, well, maybe not blue sky thinking, maybe grey sky thinking for you. Imagine you got binned off from Smartly tomorrow, let's say, and you had to build, or you wanted to build and sell an AdTech or a MarTech solution in the Middle East from scratch today. What would you do differently? What would you build?
That's a tough one, eh?
And by the way, I get to keep the rights, any rights for it, because,
Then I'm going to be mindful of what I say. I might not disclose the tech, but what I'll say, what I'm going to do differently, right, is going back to the roots of this region, the heritage, the culture. What is true to the Middle East? Understanding those needs. And I'll give you a prime example. We talk about it every day of our life. I mean, my kids talk about it now, to the point, right? And we know what that is. 2 letters. AI.
We've all heard it.
Fascinating word, fascinating solution. Yes, it's going to be widely adopted. Love it. But the reality of it is, I've been in so many meetings, friends, non-friends, outside of the industry, when you have a nice lunch or whatever, and it's a very small community here, if you think about it. Everyone talks about it, is in some shape or form. The number one question we get sometimes is, we get the technology, we get what AI is, we get what it's going to do. We get how it can fundamentally change and drive efficiencies across so many different sectors, right? What companies look for is, how do you actually use it? What are the different components of AI? What are we doing as a business that we're not really adopting it as fast as everyone else seems to be thinking they should? What kind of personnel do you need? What's that one human? If we had to hire a human tomorrow, what should they be doing?
For me,
no one has.
I think whether it's a horse and cart, whether it's a PC, whether it's a bit of tech, whether it's the 2-letter word that we're avoiding saying for some reason, but I'm totally on for it. It just comes down to one fundamental for me. So what? So what? If it doesn't bring value, if it doesn't bring benefit, if you don't know how to apply it or where to apply it, so what?
And going back to your point, Dom, if I was to re-enter this region with a new solution, is really understand what is the needs of this market. What are they trying to do? Work closely with stakeholders across this region and understand their vision, because that's where if you go back into their world, they're looking at what solutions, what services can come in and genuinely help us, right? And you see it. You're a resident of this region now, and you're looking at the day-to-day news. Look at the way they're opening certain doors for certain skill sets. They're not doing it for, hey, just come here. They're doing it because if you can genuinely add value to our region, come here, help us, grow with us.
Yeah, true partnership, just as we started talking about earlier on this record.
Exactly.
So then take that even further down the track, thinking, say, 5 years from now, what do you think advertising in the Middle East will be known for globally? What's going to be the thing that stands out as a shining beacon? What needs to happen between now and then for that to become reality?
GCC in general, honestly, is going to lead the way to be smarter across all verticals, across all technologies, across all services. And we see that we're starting to experience it. I call us the newer wave of individuals or expats that have joined the region. But there are individuals, friends, fans been here for years, decades, if not. And they've seen transformation. MENA keeps paving the way. And you're seeing it everywhere across all sectors, all verticals, all solution providers entering and changing, because it does want to be that new innovative hub of smart technology, smart services, smart way of living.
So then what needs to happen then? What needs to happen to get to that future facing, known as the Or are we just on the track? Are we already heading there? Are we cruising to the line? What do we need more of?
Great question. It just needs more people listening, more people understanding.
I love
Genuinely.
that answer. Absolutely love that answer. And I couldn't agree more. I think the more we can listen to each other, the more we can work with our partners and actually deliver to the requirements of the region, not to some template that's been made up in Europe or North America or China or India or somewhere else. I think that makes absolute sense to me. So we're gonna finish up, Moda, with
go for it.
I'm going to interrupt you. Because I'm watching the time on the record. We're going to finish up with a 30-second quick fire round. First answer
Love
that
these.
comes to your mind, 1-word answers only, or 2-word answers if it's one of them that we mentioned before. So, what is the most overrated buzzword in ad tech right now?
AI.
The most underrated opportunity in MENA ad tech today?
Data privacy.
Relationships or technology?
Relationships, hands down.
And one skill ad tech professionals in MENA must develop next.
Continue listening.
So that was Moda. Thanks for listening. And if you're building, buying, or backing ad tech in the Middle East, we'll see you in the next episode.